Welcome to my video series, The Heroine's Journey. I'm Susanna Liller, and it's time to find your happiness. We find our happiness on the journey because of the lessons that we learn and the gifts that we receive, but it does not mean that the journey is a walk in the park, that it's easy. There are definitely hard parts to it, which we have been talking about in the past 3 videos. We talked about how there are good things and bad things that happen on the journey, and their purpose is to help you grow, to shape you into your full potential, your full heroinism. Yes, that is a word. And you meet all kinds of, we've talked about the threshold guardians, and they, you can kind of get used to them. They're always around, yammering in your ear, the old voices of warnings and things that you heard, and what our culture may be, what you derive from the people around you. You're not smart enough, you're not pretty enough, you're too old, you're too young, all that stuff that when we decide to make a change, decide to step across the threshold and start a journey, those voices get loud, and they pretty much stay with us all the time. But they're the kinds of irritant that you can say, go take a back seat. I'm just so done hearing from you, and sort of push them aside. But there's a couple things on the journey that aren't so easy to ignore. And actually, the beauty of it is you don't want to ignore them because they actually turn out to be good things, useful to the heroine, as hard as they may be. And so we've already talked about in a previous video, the belly of the whale. And you want to go through the belly of the whale, which is hard because you feel like you're being tossed and turned and put upside down and shaken, and like the rug has been pulled out from under your feet. But it's helpful because it gives you a different perspective. It helps you view yourself and the world differently, because sometimes we need that. Sometimes we just keep walking through life and yeah, we want to make a change, but we're just not seeing what we need to do. And then smack, you get swallowed by something, and it helps you wake up. And then I talked about going into the abyss. And the abyss is another way of talking about going within into the dark places inside of you where you might have stuffed some stuff that you didn't want to look at or deal with for whatever reason. And it's like going into the dark. I gave some examples of how when Luke Skywalker goes to visit Yoda and he has to go into the dark cave and he meets his father there. So it's the hard things that you don't want to face gets sort of stuffed into the abyss, or it's the shadow. And so this video, we're going to talk about the dragon and what that is and how that's a good thing when you meet up with the dragon. As scary or uncomfortable or how much you might want to run from it as it might seem, it's a way to heal. So the dragon is usually what you find when you go into the abyss. And you don't always meet a dragon on every journey. Some are more, it's just when the time is right, the dragons will surface. And dragons are things to look at, things for you to sort of turn over and consider. Sometimes they're very insistent, asking for your consideration, but they're most often deeply held beliefs or fears that probably got instilled in you when you were a child, when the adult voices around you that you trusted said something, and you in your child mind went, oh, okay, and you took it in and believed it. And then the adult you hasn't really had access to this information unless you, heroine, do the work of the heroine and you take the time to go within and see what you need to address. Look at your old patterns. Why do I keep doing this? My friend, maybe yours now, Joseph Campbell, his quote from The Power of Myth: all of these dragon killings and threshold crossings have to do with getting past being stuck. And it can often be when we're feeling the most stuck that we realize we have to confront something that keeps coming up from within. And again, I'm talking about what's inside of you that needs to be examined. So here's an example of how that can come about. So I don't know when my mother started telling me how old I was, but she would say, make sure that you find the right guy, meaning to marry, in college, because after they graduate, all the good ones are gone. And I know that's probably today in 2021, you're thinking, holy mackerel, who would ever say that? But this was, so I was going through college in the early 70s. And I didn't, when I was little, take that in consciously, but obviously it was in there. And the reason why my mother said it, and it's not always bad intentioned, it's just what that adult person around you thinks is good for you to learn. And my mother did, because she was in college and she was having a great time, and there were some wonderful guys. She went to dances, and this is the big band era, and she loved the music, and it was just a beautiful time for her. And what happened was the Second World War. And all those guys left. And all those potential prospects she might have had for getting married vanished. Now, it all turned out okay, because she found my dad and he found her, and it worked out. And here I am. And they are both gone, have left this plane. But it did happen later than she had hoped it would happen. Older than, but then, war changes everything. So she wasn't alone in that. But she would tell me that. And, I think if you had asked me when I was in college, do I believe that? I would have said no. But I ended up meeting the person, my first husband, right after Christmas break, senior year. And he ended up being the guy that I married. And it turned out not to be a well-suited marriage, though I would never take it away ever from my experiences, because I have amazing children and grandchildren. So, but it just shows you how my adult self, not until I really looked at it and examined why my mother would have told me that, my adult self never got the memo that I didn't need to follow that advice that I got so long ago. And there's another story like that about the ham, cooking the ham. And maybe you've heard this, that the mother is making a Christmas ham and she's showing her grown daughter, how to do it. And she's putting the glaze on it with the mustard and the brown sugar. And then she does the crisscross thing on the top and puts the cloves in the intersection of each crisscross, and it's looking beautiful. And she gets the pan out that she's going to use. And then before she puts it in the pan and she's preheated the oven and the oven's ready, she takes a knife and she cuts off 2 inches from one end and almost 2 inches from the other end. And then she puts it in the pan, showing her daughter, and then puts it in the oven. And the daughter says, okay, so I get that, Mom, it's pretty easy, but why did you cut those ends off? What does that do? And she said, well, the mother kind of paused and thought about it, and your grandmother always did that. So that's how I learned, and I do it the same way. If you want to know, ask your grandmother. So she says, okay, I will. And she goes and calls her grandmother, explains what she just witnessed. Why do you cut how does it benefit the ham by you cutting off the ends? And there was a pause on the other end of the phone. And the grandmother said, well, it's because my pan was too small. I had to cut off the ends. So things get passed down and they're never clearly explained. And we just keep doing the same thing. And I have to tell you one more thing, which was another wake-up call for me. So again, when these things come up, and it's something about the journey that will bring these up for you to look at, whether you want to look at it or not. And you, as a heroine, and you know this, can always choose, I'm not going to deal with this now. Go back to your lair, go back to the abyss. See you later, dragon. But you can learn and change for the better if you do address them. And so I was a young mom with 2 little children, and they would disobey, and I would just, my first instinct was to swat them on the bottom, not with a belt or anything. Well, sometimes I used a wooden spoon, but it was never bad, but it would stop them. They would yell. And it's just what I did because my parents did it to me. So I just didn't even think and kept doing it. And one day I'm just feeling awful about what I had just done, hit my son on the rear end. And then I thought, what am I doing? I'm trying to teach them not to hit, and I'm hitting. I woke up. And really, the dragons come to help you wake up. And they help you shine the light on old stuff that needs to be released. And when you think about dragons in mythology, they're always laying on treasure. And if you think of your dragons inside, the unaddressed ones, the ones you haven't met and communicated with yet, if you think of them, they're laying on parts of you that need to be looked at, that are parts of yourself that if they can come back into commission or be renovated or reclaimed, then it's like precious parts of your treasure that come back to you. So I have always celebrated meeting up with the dragon, as scary as it might be for people. And I help heroines communicate. So it's not at all in my process slaying a dragon. What good does that do? You want to talk to your dragon and find out what the heck is going on. You know, my dragon would have said, well, it's because all the guys left and your mom wanted to be sure that you found somebody. So thank you very much, dragon. I don't need that kind of help anymore. So what I do is I encourage writing to your dragon and having your dragon write to you. So the first step is your dragon writes you a letter saying what's going on and how they're feeling. And you have to get in that right side of your brain and just go with the flow, suspend disbelief. You're writing to that part of yourself that has been in the dark, that has been stuffed away and repressed and avoided or ignored. And what does that part of you have to say? And then I ask heroines that work with me, my coaching clients, to draw a picture of that dragon. What does that dragon look like? And drawing the picture with me is always about accessing a deeper level inside yourself. When you actually draw or paint, it's not so much your left brain, it's a more emotional piece. So they draw just however they can represent it, stick figures, whatever. And then I ask them to write a letter themselves to their dragon. Dragon, dear dragon, thanks for trying to help, but it's not helping. And I want to stop that pattern. And you don't need to help me. You don't need to get me to forget. I want you to help me wake up and look at the patterns that I've had and change them if they're not good patterns. And so you open up this communication and you learn something. And then I ask them to draw a picture of their reconciliation with their dragon, the two of them together. What does that look like? And those are always such great representations. There was one woman I remember who had her dragon and herself sitting at a table drinking tea. So it's communicating. And it's also paying attention and being aware that things will come up in a timely way, usually, for you to address them. And again, you have a choice. You can send them back into the dark, or you can deal with it. It takes courage. Heroines have courage. And you gain in strength, confidence, courage, and you feel a whole lot lighter. And things that you used to do because of that dragon, whatever piece of you he was sitting on or she was sitting on, it's gone and you act differently. So I would encourage you to invite all your dragons to tea, to write to them, because ultimately, it gives you the freedom to be who you are. You're not reacting in response to some old something that doesn't even apply anymore. And we get them and we keep them and we don't even know they're in there, but they are. So when they want to speak to you, please speak to them. And I just wonder what your dragon is guarding. So write a letter. Tell me about it. Thank you for being with me for this talk about our beloved dragons and how they are gifts to us. And I'll see you at the next video and enjoy your journey.